The jungle was quiet as the fog moved between tall glowing trees and thick, alien plants. Mason walked slowly through the thick leaves, his boots making no sound on the soft ground. He had come to Yervin 9 to find rare crystals for trade, but now he only wanted to get back to his ship before nightfall. The planet was strange and beautiful, but it held many dangers too. Many sounds had no source, too many plants looked like they were watching him. Then he heard Ida's soft cry, high and sharp like a baby animal in pain. It came from the left behind a group of giant red mushrooms. Mason stopped and listened again. Sound came again, weaker this time, like the creature was getting tired. He could leave and ignore it, just focus on getting to safety before night, but something pulled him toward the cry like a string tugging at his chest. He pushed through the wet vines and the smell of the fog thickened. There it was, a small creature, no bigger than a house cat, lying in a metal snare. Its fur was silver and gold, and its eyes glowed green in the dark. It was an alien lion cub, its front leg caught in the trap, bleeding and shaking. Mason looked around carefully. He knew where there was a cub there could be a mother, or worse, a pack, but the area was quiet, too quiet. He crouched near the cub and pulled a small tool from his belt. The cub growled weakly, its eyes filled with fear, but it did not move. Mason slowly opened the trap with careful hands and lifted the leg out. The cub gave a short cry and then lay still, breathing fast. He tore a piece from his shirt and wrapped the leg tight to stop the bleeding. Cub looked up at him, blinking slowly, then closed its eyes. Mason sat back watching it breathe, the fog around them making everything feel unreal. He had seen strange things in the galaxy, but this moment felt different. He had touched something innocent and wild, something pure. Then the silence broke. A deep growl rumbled from the trees, followed by another and another. Mason stood quickly, holding the cub in his arms without thinking. Shapes moved in the fog, dark and large, with glowing eyes like stars in the mist. Growls grew louder and closer, surrounding him from all sides. One step behind him, one to the right, then a shadow crossed in front. He counted 6, no, maybe 8 figures circling him, slowly closing in. The cub in his arms moved slightly, letting out a small whimper. Then one of the shadows stepped closer, a huge lion larger than a truck with golden fur and scars across its face. Its eyes locked on Mason's, and it did not blink. It sniffed the air, then the cub, then him. Mason held his breath, sweat running down his neck, his legs ready to run, but nowhere to go. The great lion stepped forward again until its nose almost touched the cube. It gave a low sound, not a growl, more like a question. The cub opened its eyes weakly and let out a small noise in reply. The lion looked up at Mason, and their eyes met. Time froze. Then the lion stepped back and sat. The others followed, moving silently into a half circle around him, but not attacking. Mason stood still, unsure what was happening. Large lion let out a low rumble and turned away, slowly walking into the jungle. One by one the others followed, leaving a path between the trees open and waiting. The cub gave a soft cry again, as if telling him to follow. Mason hesitated, then took one slow step forward, then another. Fog swallowed them all, but the glowing eyes stayed visible like floating lights, guiding him deeper into the unknown. He did not know why they let him live or what they wanted, but something told him this was not over. This was the beginning of something much bigger, and somewhere deep inside him a strange feeling grew. He was no longer just a visitor on this planet. Had been marked by the wild chosen. The cry in the fog had changed everything, and the jungle was watching, waiting, breathing with him. Mason followed the glowing eyes deeper into the jungle, the silver cub still in his arms, its fur warm and soft against his chest, its breathing slow but steady. The fog around him moved like it was alive, curling and shifting with each step he took. The alien lions did not growl anymore. They made no sound, only their heavy paws touched the ground with quiet thuds. Their golden bodies slipping in and out of the fog like shadows with form and will. He tried to stay calm, tried to keep his heart from jumping out of his chest, but each breath felt sharp like ice in his throat. He had no weapon, no clear plan, only trust, and a strange feeling that the pride was leading him, not hunting him. Trail opened into a wide area, trees bending outward like a circle had been carved into the jungle itself. The ground was smooth like stone, but covered with soft moss glowing. Slightly under his boots, strange markings curved along the edge, deep lines. Drawn with claws, not hands, the pride stopped and sat around the circle, forming a ring of golden watchers, their eyes fixed on Mason, the air thick with heat and waiting. The largest lion stepped forward again, the one with the scarred face, its mane streaked with deep red like dried blood or paint. It stood before Mason, unmoving, a statue of muscle and power, its head lowered slightly, like it was judging his worth, not with hate, not with anger, but something deeper, something older. Mason looked at the cub, then back at the lion. His voice tried to speak, but no words came, only silence filled the space between them. Lion leaned in slowly and pressed its nose against the cub's head. A soft sound came from its throat, not a growl, not a threat. It was gentle, full of worry, maybe love. Cub stirred, eyes opening for a moment, then closing again. It was weak but alive. The lion turned its gaze to Mason again, then stepped closer and touched its nose to his hand for one breath. One moment time froze. The pride stood as one, each lion bowing its head, then lifting it again. Their bodies tense but still calm. Something had changed in that moment, something ancient had shifted. Scarred Lion gave a low rumble and began to walk away into the dark path beyond the circle. The others followed, but one lioness stayed behind. Her fur shimmered in the dim light. Her eyes deep blue, like a calm ocean before a storm. She stepped toward Mason slowly, each step graceful, but full of meaning. She looked at the cub, then at him, then sat down and waited, her tail curled neatly beside her. Mason did not move, unsure what was expected, unsure if this was a warning or an invitation. He looked around at the circle, the trees, the symbols, and then back at her. The lioness stood and turned her back to him, slowly walking down a narrow path lined with strange plants that glowed. As she passed, the message was clear: follow or be left behind. Mason adjusted the cub in his arms and stepped after her, the plants brushing his legs with soft warmth, like they welcomed him. Path twisted and turned, growing steeper and darker, the fog now thinner, replaced by shadows and soft light from glowing stones stuck in the trees. They reached a ledge, overlooking a vast valley below, filled with small glowing pools and giant roots that crisscrossed the land, like veins of the planet itself. The lioness sat at the edge, looking out over the valley, her breathing calm, her body still. She looked back once to see if he had followed, then turned her gaze forward again, stood beside her, not too close, not too far. The cub whimpered in his arms, and the lioness turned to him again, eyes narrowing. She leaned in and sniffed the cub, then Mason, her eyes reading his soul without a word. Then she did something unexpected. She lowered her head fully to the ground before him, not as a threat, not as a test, but something else, something sacred. He stepped back unsure, then knelt slowly, lowering the cub to the soft moss between them. The lioness moved forward and gently licked the cub's face, then laid beside it, curling her body protectively around the small form. Mason watched silently, unsure what he had done to earn this trust, unsure what it meant. A new growl echoed from behind, not from a lion, but something else, something massive and near. Lioness lifted her head, ears turning toward the sound, then stood between Mason and the noise, her body tense, ready to fight, ready to die if needed. The cub mewed weakly, and the noise stopped. From the trees another lion appeared, older, slower, with a white mane and glowing scars across its chest. It walked with pain, but each step was strong, full of wisdom and strength. It looked at Mason and the cub and the lioness, and then gave a roar so deep it shook the ground, the trees, the sky itself. The pride had spoken. Mason was no longer an outsider. He had passed their judgment. He had been chosen. The jungle had changed. Its voice was softer, its shadows less cruel. As Mason walked behind the lioness, the silver cub still wrapped close to his chest, the trees around him seemed to move aside gently, like they knew him, like they had been waiting for him. The path was narrow, roots curling around his feet, and strange blue plants glowing near his knees. The air smelled like old earth and electric rain. Soft sounds of birds or maybe insects floated through the air, but nothing felt dangerous. Now it felt like a dream, but it was real, too real. The lioness walked ahead, never looking back, her steps Smooth and light, her muscles calm but powerful, she led him with silent purpose. Like this was a ritual, like this had happened before long ago. And now again they reached a hill where strange symbols were carved into the ground, not written with tools, but scratched by claws deep and clean. The lines curved around a stone circle in the center of the clearing where a strange mist floated. Just above the surface, glowing with soft green light, Mason stopped at the edge of the circle, unsure if he should step inside. The lioness looked back for the first time. Her eyes sharp but calm, she waited, her tail swaying left to right slowly like a silent command. He stepped forward slowly, the cub twitching gently in his arms, as if it too felt something was different, something old and sacred. Mist brushed his boots, cold and warm at the same time, like touching a memory he did not have. His mind grew quiet, but his skin felt alive, every part of him aware of the eyes watching from the trees, from the rocks, from the shadows. Behind light, he knelt and placed the cub gently in the center of the circle. The lioness stepped beside it, her nose touching its head softly. Then she looked up and roared, not loud, not angry, but deep and full of power. A call, not a threat, a signal. Jungle answered. The air trembled as more lions stepped from the shadows. One by one they came, not in anger, not in hunger, but in silence, their eyes calm, their bodies strong. They formed a wide circle around the stone, one lion each stepping to a symbol around the edge, like pieces of a puzzle. Mason stood inside the circle, breathing slow, his heart not racing now but heavy, like something deep inside was waking up, something ancient and wild. The lions did not growl, did not move, they waited. Then the old lion with the white mane stepped forward, his steps slow, his eyes sharp, his face worn like stone carved. By time he looked at Mason with no hate, no fear, only knowing. He stepped close and raised his paw, slowly placing it on the ground near Mason's foot. Then he lowered his head and pressed it gently to the earth, his whole body bowing, not in worship, not in weakness, but in choice. The others followed one by one. They bowed heads, low tails, still the circle complete the silence. Deep, Mason felt like a thread had pulled through him, connecting him to all of them, to the ground, to the sky, to something greater than lions or humans. The cub stirred and gave a soft cry, its eyes opened bright and clear, and it looked at Mason with something like trust, maybe something more. Lioness gave a low sound and stood again. She walked to Mason and placed her paw on his shoulder, heavy and warm and final, like a mark, like a seal. The mist around them lifted, slowly revealing the carvings more clearly. Now they glowed with a soft light, and strange images showed animals, planets, stars, hands, claws, eyes. Mason saw one that looked like a human and a lion side by side, not fighting, not running, just standing together. He blinked, the light faded, the mist returned, and the lioness turned away, walking down a new path behind the stone. The others began to follow again, slow and quiet, like a stream of golden rivers flowing through the forest. Mason picked up the cub again. It purred softly against him, no longer shaking, no longer scared. He stepped from the circle and followed the pride, the jungle opening before them, like it had been waiting for this moment. They passed giant trees with hollow centers, glowing blue water dripping from the leaves. Strange birds with 4 wings flew above, singing short, sweet notes as they passed through beams of soft green light that fell like rain but left no wet behind. Cub shifted in Mason's arms and looked up at him, eyes half closed but peaceful. It licked his chin once and closed its eyes again. Safe content, part of something bigger. Mason's chest felt warm, his thoughts quiet for the first time in years. He did not feel lost, did not feel like a visitor. He felt accepted, he felt like the path he walked now was his, not by force, not by accident, but by something older than choice. The lioness stopped at a rise where the jungle opened to a wide view of the land below, rivers glowing with purple light, mountains floating in the air, slow and steady like clouds made of stone and wind. She looked back at Mason once more and blinked slow and sure. The walk was over, the acceptance was complete, and Mason did not feel like a man walking with beasts. Felt like one of them. The next morning, Mason woke alone. The silver cub was gone, the lioness was gone. The jungle around him stood still, like it was holding its breath. The fog had returned thicker than before, the soft blue light now pale and dull, like a dying star. He sat up quickly, heart-pounding, eyes searching, but no sound, no growl, no paw steps. The moss under him was still warm, as if something had rested there beside him, but now it was empty and quiet too. Quiet. He stood slowly, calling out, not loud, not desperate, but firm, as if the pride would answer. But they did not. Only the breeze replied, carrying strange smells and the rustle of leaves that felt far too close. He took a step forward, unsure which path was real. Now every tree looked the same, every turn felt like the last one. His mind spun as the fog wrapped around his legs and climbed toward his chest like cold vines. Suddenly, a sharp noise cracked through the air. A branch snapped, something fast, something heavy. Mason turned quickly, body tense, eyes wide and ready. But nothing came, nothing moved, only the jungle breathing slow and deep like a giant creature sleeping with one eye open. He remembered the lioness, her calm stare, the old lion's heavy paw on the ground, the silent circle of watchers. Something inside him whispered this was not abandonment. This was something else, something older, something dangerous. This was a trial. He pushed through the fog carefully, hands brushing leaves, eyes scanning shadows. He needed to move, needed to stay calm. The pride would not have left the cub unless it was part of the plan, unless it was time for him to prove something. Without them, hours passed, maybe more, maybe less. The sky above was hidden. The sun did not show the light, did not change. Time had no meaning, only movement, only instinct, only the steady rhythm of his feet on soft earth. Then the jungle shifted again. Sounds came from behind him, slow and steady, crunching leaves, breaking twigs. A deep breath like a growl without voice. He turned quickly, eyes sharp. There it was, not a lion, not a creature. He knew its body, long and low like a serpent, but with legs like blades, eyes black and wide, jaws split into 3 rows of thin, sharp teeth. Its skin shimmered dark red and purple as it moved between the fog with deadly grace. It had seen him. Mason froze, his muscles tight, his breathing shallow. He backed away one step, then another. The creature hissed, soft but clear, and began to circle him, eyes never blinking, body never stopping. Reached for a sharp stone near his foot, lifting it slow, careful, his mind racing for a plan, but his hands steady. The creature lunged without warning, fast as lightning, teeth wide, claws raised. Mason jumped sideways, rolling on the ground as the beast snapped at air, missing him by inches. He threw the stone, striking its back. It roared loud and furious, spinning toward him. Again, Mason grabbed a broken branch, thick and strong, swinging hard as the beast charged again. The wood hit the side of its head, knocking it away for a second, only a second. Slithered back, growling deep like a boiling storm. Mason's heart pounded. Sweat dripping, eyes burning. He grabbed a vine from a nearby tree, tied one end to the branch, the other to a stone shaped like a hook, an idea forming quick and desperate. The creature charged again, and Mason waited, 1 breath, 2 breath, then threw the trap low and wide. The hook caught its leg, pulling it down with a sharp snap. The branch flew forward, hitting its neck. It screeched loud and rolled into the bushes, vanishing into the fog silence. Returned, his hands shook, but he stood tall, breath heavy, eyes sharp. He was bleeding a little, but alive. The trial was not over, but he had survived the first strike. He walked on the fog, lifting slowly, revealing small footprints in the mud, tiny paws pressed into the earth. The cub had passed this way. The trail was fresh, leading toward a thick line of glowing trees. He followed fast, hope rising each step, stronger than the last, his body tired, but his will burning brighter than ever. Trees opened into a clearing, and there in the center the silver cub stood, weak but alive, eyes wide. As it looked at him, behind it stood 2 lions, one young, one old, their eyes calm, their bodies still. They had been watching, maybe helping, maybe judging. Mason dropped to his knees, arms open. The cub limped forward slowly, then ran into his chest, its small head pushing against his neck, soft purrs rising from its throat. Young lion stepped forward and bowed its head once, then walked away, disappearing into the jungle. The old lion followed, but stopped beside Mason for a moment, its eyes deep and knowing, then it too vanished into the mist. Mason held the cub close, heart full, eyes burning, But not with fear, not with pain. This was something else, something pure, something earned. He looked up at the sky, now clear above, a single beam of light falling through the trees, warming his face and the cub's fur. The trial was over. The jungle had spoken, and he had answered. The air felt heavier as Mason moved forward, the cub asleep in his arms, its soft breaths rising and falling against his chest. The jungle around them began to hum, not with danger, but with memory, like the trees remembered steps like these from long ago. The vines pulled away gently, the ground became smoother, and the trees taller, their leaves glowing with slow pulses of blue and white. Ahead, a wide stone mouth opened in the side of a rocky hill, its surface marked with ancient claw-line symbols no human had ever seen before. The cub stirred slightly as Mason stepped into the entrance. The cool air inside touched his skin like soft water. The walls inside were alive with light lines that crawled and shifted, glowing with deep gold and green patterns that moved like flowing rivers. He walked deeper with slow, careful steps, the cave sloping down into the earth, the path surrounded by silence, no footsteps, no growls, only the sound of his breathing and the faint pulse of the cave itself. Like a sleeping heart waking slowly, then the passage opened into a vast chamber, a circular hall with high walls and a domed ceiling covered in carvings of lion stars and strange shapes he could not name. In the center stood a platform made of smooth, dark stone surrounded by glowing stones set in the floor like a map of the sky. Mason stepped onto the platform, the cub still resting, and the room changed. The lights dimmed, the walls shimmered, and the carvings began to move. The lions walked. The stars spun, the shapes danced like stories told without sound or voice. A beam of light dropped from above, bathing him in soft gold warmth. The cub lifted its head, eyes wide, as the light wrapped around both of them. The walls around them changed again, showing new scenes, lions standing beside humans, roaring together, fighting side by side, facing shadows made of fire and smoke. He saw a human with armor of bone, a lion with wings of fire. They stood back to back, surrounded by enemies, but not afraid. He saw a cub carried by a man into the stars. He saw a world burning, then healing, then blooming again. The visions faded, the room returned to stillness, and the platform began to rise slowly, lifting Mason and the cub higher toward a narrow shaft of light above. The stone moved like it was alive, carrying them upward until they reached a new chamber, smaller but filled with something ancient. The center of the room stood the old lion, the one with the white mane, its eyes closed, its body still behind it. The lioness with deep blue eyes, her fur glowing with the same light that filled the air, stepped forward slowly. The old lion opened its eyes and gave a low, deep roar, not of anger, not of warning, but of welcome. The lioness bowed her head and walked toward Mason, her eyes calm, her steps silent. She touched her nose to the cub, then looked at him, and waited. Mason placed the cub gently on the ground. It walked unsteady toward the two lions. The lioness lowered her head, and the cub rubbed against her side. The old lion stepped closer and pressed its paw against the floor. The stone glowed where it touched, and lines of light spread across the room, connecting wall-to-wall, floor to ceiling. Symbols appeared around Mason and the cub, swirling like wind, made of stars and fire. The old lion roared again, this time louder. The walls shook, the air trembled, and the roar echoed through the mountain and beyond. Outside the cave, the jungle grew quiet. Every bird, every beast, every breeze paused as the sound reached their ears. The sky turned a deeper shade of purple. The moon shifted, and a ring of light formed around the tallest peak. Back inside, Mason stood at the center as the energy from the walls flowed into him, not painful, not forced. It was warm. It was like remembering something, forgotten something. His blood already knew. His hands glowed faintly. The cub looked up at him and blinked, slow and calm. The lioness stepped back. The old lion bowed its head one final time, then turned and vanished into a wall that opened like a curtain of light. Mason felt something settle inside him, not magic, not power, but understanding. The jungle, the pride, the trial, it was all a path to this moment. He picked up the cub again and turned back toward the path, the lioness beside him walking in silence. The chamber faded behind them. the light dimming with each step until they were outside again under the twin moons, and the stars that had watched over them all. Along he could feel the jungle listening, watching, as if it had accepted him, as if it had welcomed him into something eternal, something sacred. Above all things, the roar of the ancients still echoed not just in the sky, but in his bones. The wind changed as Mason stepped into the open, the cub now walking beside him, the lioness close behind. The jungle no longer felt wild. It felt like home, the ground soft under his boots, the trees quiet like they were holding their breath for something. Unseen, he reached a small stream that glowed under moonlight, its water clean and cold. The cub drank slowly and looked up at him with trusting eyes. Mason knelt beside it, his fingers brushing the surface, feeling something strange in the water like. It carried stories, whispers of those who had walked before then. A sound broke the calm, sharp and fast. A sound that did not belong. It came from the sky, something heavy, something made by machines, a humming buzz growing louder with each second. Lioness tensed ears, high muscles, tighter eyes scanning the dark trees. The cub stepped back behind. Mason, fear rising in its small body. Mason stood, his heart sinking. He knew that sound, he had heard it before on other planets, always followed by trouble, always followed by pain. 3 small ships dropped through the clouds, dark gray with sharp edges, no markings. No lights, only purpose. They landed fast, dust and leaves flying into the air, engines hissing, then silence. Heavy and dangerous doors opened and figures stepped out, tall and armored with black suits and glowing visors, each one carrying a weapon shaped like a claw and a spike. No words, no mercy. These were poachers, hunters of rare creatures, killers for credits. They moved like machines, spreading out into the jungle, scanning, listening, tracking. One of them stopped near the stream, looking down at tracks left by the cub, its helmet tilted, and then it raised its weapon, pointing toward the trees. Mason knew what they wanted. They were here for the lions, for the cub, for the old blood in their veins, worth a fortune to collectors and labs. They would not care about laws or reasons. They would take what they wanted and burn the rest. Stepped forward, raising his hands, showing he was unarmed. The cub stayed behind him. The lioness disappeared into the shadows, silent and unseen. The poachers looked at him. Then one stepped closer, his voice cold and empty through the helmet, telling Mason to move away, telling him to drop the animal. Mason refused, his voice steady, his stance firm. He told them the cub was not for sale, not for study, not for them. He told them to turn back now before it was too late. The poacher laughed and raised his weapon, aiming at the cub behind him. Next moment was chaos. A roar exploded from the trees, so loud the earth shook. The lioness leaped from the dark, slamming into the poacher, sending him flying into a tree, his weapon snapping in half as he hit the ground. The other poachers turned and fired red bolts, cutting through the air. Mason dove to the side, pulling the cub with him behind a rock. The lioness darted between trees, moving too fast to hit, claws tearing through armor, roars shaking the sky. But there were too many more soldiers. Stepped out of the ships, firing into the jungle. Fire spread across the plant, smoke rising. Mason grabbed a broken branch and tied a sharp stone to it, fast and tight. He had fought before, he knew how to survive. He moved through the fog, striking from shadows, setting traps made from vines and thorns, leading them into dead ends, where lions waited with jaws wide and eyes burning. One by one, the poachers fell, but they kept coming, kept fighting, kept hunting. The cub cried out as a poacher grabbed it, pulling it into a cage. Mason ran faster than he ever had, his legs burning, his heart pounding. He tackled the soldiers, smashing the cage against a rock, freeing the cub and standing tall with fire in his eyes. More lions came from the hills, golden fur glowing in the firelight, their roars echoing through the trees. Mason stood among them, a stick in his hand, a cub at his feet, his shirt torn, his face marked with dirt and blood, but his eyes full of fury. The poachers hesitated, seeing the pride, seeing the man who had become more than human, who stood without fear, who fought like he had been born of the jungle. Then the old lion stepped from the smoke, his white mane shining, his eyes calm and sharp. He gave one roar so deep it felt like the world stopped, and the poachers turned and ran those who could not lay still in the dirt, broken and silent. Fire died slowly, rain falling from the sky soft and steady, the jungle quiet again. Mason stood in the center, the cub beside him, the pride around him, the lioness licking her wounds, but standing strong. He looked up at the stars and saw no ships, only peace, only clouds, only the night watching from above. He had defended what mattered. He had become more than a guest, more than a friend. He had become a guardian. The rain stopped before dawn, and the jungle shimmered under the first light of the twin suns, soft beams falling across the broken earth, the burned leaves and the footprints left by the battle. The poachers were gone, their ships abandoned the wreckage. Silent under twisted branches, an ash mason stood near the stream where it all began, the silver cub resting beside him, its fur damp, but its eyes clear and bright. The lioness watched from a nearby rock, her tail flicking slowly, her body still strong, though marked by scars, each one now part of a story that would never be forgotten. He looked around and felt the weight of everything that had happened, not as a burden, but as something real, something earned. He had walked through fear, he had faced death, he had stood between hunters and the hunted, and now the jungle stood with him. A soft sound came from behind. The old lion stepped forward, his white mane glowing under the sun, his paws silent on the wet ground. He looked at Mason for a long time, then bowed his head low and deep, a sign of final respect, a gesture older than stars. Other lions followed one by one, each stepping forward, each bowing, each roaring, once not loud but full of meaning, as if naming Mason part of something ancient, something greater than man or beast. He did not speak, he only listened as the jungle came alive again, not with noise, but with breath, with the steady rhythm of a place healed and whole. And watching later, he walked to the wrecked ship's tools and supplies scattered like broken bones. He took what he could use, nothing more. He had no need for weapons, now no need for gear meant to tame wild lands. He only took food, water, cloth, and a few small parts to build something new. He found a hollow tree wide enough to shape into a shelter near the sacred cave where the symbol still glowed under the stone ceiling. He built slowly, with care, with help from the pride who brought branches, leaves, even smooth stones carried in their jaws. Days passed, or maybe weeks. Time no longer moved in hours, it moved in seasons, in stars, in the quiet way. The cub grew stronger, learning to stalk bugs, pounce on shadows, and curl beside Mason. Each night its purr, deep and soft like a song made only for him, marked the passing of moons, not with calendars, but with stories, each one carved into the wood of the shelter. Lions leaping, stars falling, ships burning, hearts healing, every mark a memory, every line a truth. One morning, a small craft appeared in the sky, no weapons, no noise. It drifted down near the wreckage, where signals still pulsed weak and broken. Two humans stepped out, dressed in explorer suits, eyes wide as they looked around at the ruins, the quiet, and then at Mason. They asked what happened. He told them little, only that hunters came and left nothing behind, only scars and silence. They asked if he would return with them back to the stations, back to Earth, back to the world he once knew. He looked at the cub, now nearly full grown, its silver fur shining like a blade, its eyes full of wild light and calm fire. He looked at the pride resting nearby under trees they had called home for generations. Then he shook his head gently and told them no, he was not lost. He had found what he never knew he needed. He had found a place where every heartbeat had meaning, every breath had weight, every roar had power. Humans left confused but respectful, taking his old ID, his name, and a message to be sent across the stars, not of sorrow, not of farewell, but of peace. Tell them, I am alive, he had said. Tell them, I am not alone. Tell them, I have found something worth more than credits, more than glory, more than home. That night the pride gathered again near the glowing circle where the carvings still moved under the stone. They watched the stars as one, the old lion lying close, the lioness beside Mason, the cub between them. Now taller, faster, stronger, a soft wind moved through the trees, carrying scents of distant flowers and deep roots. Mason breathed it in, eyes closed, arms resting across his knees. The cub leaned against him, silent and proud above Then the stars burned slow and bright across the black sky, and the jungle sighed a sound of comfort, of understanding, of deep stillness. He was no longer a visitor, no longer a man lost in wild space. He was part of the story now, part of the pride, part of the roar that would echo long after the stars forgot his name.